Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a question I think many of us have wondered about. Can you actually lose weight with intermittent fasting without, getting totally bogged down counting every single calorie?
It's a really good question, um, especially when you think about how much focus there's always been on eat less, move more.
Mm.
And for so many people, that just translates to tracking every bite.
Exactly. The apps, the food diaries, it can honestly feel like homework or worse, a second job. And let's be real, it can kind of suck the joy out of eating sometimes.
Yeah.
Effective maybe, but sustainable. That's another story.
Right. And that's sort of where intermittent fasting comes in is this different angle. Instead of
Yeah.
obsessing over what you're eating constantly, it shifts the focus more to when you're eating. It's a different framework.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive then is to really dig into the research. Can you get meaningful weight loss with intermittent fasting without the calorie counting headache? Let's get into it.
So the standard approach, the one we all kind of know, has always centered on calorie counting. The idea is simple, right? Burn more than you take in.
Hmm.
And that's why we see all the tracking apps and food journals. They're the main tools people reach for.
Yeah, and the logic seems sound very direct, almost like balancing a checkbook. But life isn't quite that neat, is it? Trying to keep up that level of tracking. It can be really draining mentally, hard to stick with.
Absolutely. For a lot of people, constantly monitoring food intake just leads to feeling restricted, maybe even developing a slightly negative relationship with food itself, which is exactly why looking at something like intermittent fasting is so appealing.
Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. There are actually studies that put intermittent fasting head to head with traditional calorie counting for weight loss. Let's maybe start with that 4.3 intermittent fasting study from 2024.
Yeah, that's a good one. There's a randomized controlled trial, which is, pretty robust study design. They had 165 participants, and they compared this 4.3 fasting plan, basically, 3 separate days a week, where you significantly cut calories against just standard daily calorie restriction.
Right.
Now, the key thing here, and this is important, is both groups were aiming for the same overall weekly energy deficit, about 34%. That's quite a cut for both sides.
So, on paper, same calorie hole being dug each week, but what actually happened with weight loss? Did they end up the same?
Well, this is the fascinating part. After a full year, the group doing the 4.3 intermittent fasting actually lost, on average, about 6 pounds more than the daily calorie restriction group.
6 pounds more over 12 months. That's not insignificant. What about sticking to it? Because that's usually the tricky part with any diet plan.
Exactly. And the researchers noted that too. Adherence, so how well people actually followed the plan, was reportedly better in the intermittent fasting group, which kind of suggests that maybe for some people, having those structured fasting days feels more doable, more sustainable perhaps, than the constant daily grind of restricting calories, like designated off periods.
Okay, interesting. So that's one study pointing towards when you eat potentially mattering quite a bit. You also mentioned another one, a time-restricted eating study, or TRE, from 2022.
Yes, that one looked at a specific type of fasting, often called early time-restricted eating. So the participants in that arm ate all their food within a 6-hour window, and crucially, that window finished early by 3 p.m.
Whoa, 3 p.m. That's quite early to stop eating for the day.
It is. And they compared this group to another group eating over a more standard 12-hour period, so a much shorter eating time frame for the TRE group, concentrated earlier.
Okay, so big difference in the eating window length. What did they find there? Similar results.
Pretty interesting results, actually. The TRE group didn't just lose more weight. They also saw improvements in other areas, things like lower diastolic blood pressure. And get this, they even reported better mood.
Better mood. That's surprising. Usually restricting food makes people grumpy.
Right. That's a really notable finding, because mood often takes a hit on restrictive diets.
So putting these together, it does seem like intermittent fasting could be a genuinely effective way to lose weight, maybe even with some extra benefits compared to just cutting calories daily.
Yeah, if we circle back to our main question, these studies strongly suggest that the timing of when we eat might be, well, more important for weight management than maybe we used to think, at least for a good number of people.
Okay, let's unpack the why a bit then. How is this working? If people aren't meticulously counting calories, how does fasting help them lose weight? What's the mechanism?
Well, there are a few potential things going on. First, and maybe the most obvious one, is just shrinking the eating window. If you only have, say, 8 hours to eat instead of 12 or 14, you just have fewer opportunities to take in calories. Even if you're not tracking, you often naturally end up eating less overall. It's just harder to pack it all in.
That makes sense. Sort of an automatic calorie control without the spreadsheet. What else?
Then there are the potential hormonal benefits.
Hmm.
Fasting periods can actually help improve your body's sensitivity to insulin. Insulin is like the key that lets sugar from your food into your cells for energy.
Right.
If you become more sensitive to insulin, that key works better. Your body gets more efficient at using glucose, potentially less likely to store excess energy as fat, and maybe even better at burning existing fat stores.
Ah, okay. So it's potentially affecting not just the calories in part, but also how our body handles those calories.
Exactly. It adds another layer beyond just simple energy balance.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't forget the simplicity factor.
Mm.
For a lot of folks, just remembering when to eat and when not to eat feels way less burdensome than logging every single morsel.
Yeah, I can see that.
That mental ease, that reduction in decision fatigue can make a huge difference in sticking with it long term. If it doesn't feel like a constant chore, you're just more likely to keep doing it.
That really resonates. The mental freedom from tracking must be a big draw. But
Yeah.
knowing nutrition science, there's usually another side to the story, right? You mentioned some findings that maybe weren't quite so clear cut.
Yes, absolutely. It's important to look at the whole picture. There's another significant study published in JAMA back in 2020. It was also a randomized clinical trial comparing time-restricted eating to daily calorie restriction.
Okay, another head-to-head comparison.
Right. But in this particular study, they actually found no significant difference in the amount of weight loss between the two groups.
Ah, okay, so that throws a bit of a wrench in things. Some studies show an advantage for fasting. This one says maybe not so much. It suggests perhaps the total calorie deficit is still king, regardless of timing. How do we square that?
I think what this really underscores is something crucial. There's probably no single best way to lose weight that works perfectly for every single person.
Hmm.
Our individual preferences, our lifestyles, even our unique biology and how our bodies respond metabolically, it all varies. What feels easy and effective for one person might be really difficult or just not work as well for someone else. For some individuals, the structure and control of calorie counting might genuinely be the better, more effective approach for them.
So it's less about finding the universally superior method and more about you, the listener, figuring out what fits your life, your personality, your body for sustainable results.
Precisely. Which leads us nicely into some practical advice maybe for people listening who are thinking, okay, I'm curious about trying intermittent fasting without counting calories.
Yeah, if someone's intrigued, what are some good starting points or things to consider?
Well, first off, I'd suggest just exploring the different popular methods. You've got 16.8, that's 16 hours fasting, 8 hours eating. There's 5.2, 5 normal days, 2 very low-calorie days, and the 4.3 we talked about earlier. It's worth kind of looking into those and seeing which pattern seems like it would mesh best with your own daily schedule, your work, your social life. Finding that sustainable rhythm is key.
Makes sense. Got to fit it into real life. What about during the eating window? Does it just become a free-for-all?
Huh. Well, while the focus here isn't strict calorie counting, it's still really, really important for your overall health and actually for supporting weight loss too, to focus on eating nutrient-dense whole foods during that window.
Good point.
Think fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, healthy fats. This stuff helps you feel full and satisfied, provides essential nutrients, and just generally supports your body better than filling up on, junk food, even if it's within the window.
Yeah, you can't just use the eating window as an excuse to go wild on processed stuff constantly.
Exactly. And another really important practical tip, hydration, especially during the fasting periods. Drinking plenty of water, maybe unsweetened tea or black coffee can really help manage hunger feelings and just keep you feeling good.
Okay, water is key. Any other quick tips for someone starting out?
I'd say the biggest one is probably listen to your body. Seriously. Pay attention to hunger, fullness, energy levels. Don't be afraid to tweak your fasting schedule if something isn't feeling right. This shouldn't feel like you're constantly fighting your own biology. It needs to be adaptable.
Right, it's a tool, not a punishment. Okay, so wrapping this all up then. It really does sound like intermittent fasting presents a legitimate alternative to calorie counting for weight loss. The research supports its effectiveness, maybe even points to better adherence for some people. The crucial thing seems to be finding the specific fasting approach that clicks with your lifestyle and really tuning into your body's signals.
That's a great summary. Yeah, the core idea is that just changing when you eat can be a surprisingly powerful lever for weight management, often leading to fewer calories consumed overall without that constant mental burden of tracking everything.
This has been super insightful, really digging into the science behind intermittent fasting and weight loss specifically. And hey, for everyone listening, if this has piqued your interest, definitely make sure you join us for our next deep dive. We're actually going to broaden the lens a bit
Mm.
and explore what the research says about intermittent fasting's effects beyond just weight. Things like mental clarity, energy levels, maybe even mood, like that one study touched on.
Yeah, there's definitely more to explore regarding the potential ripple effects of meal timing.
Absolutely. So, thank you so much for tuning in to this deep dive. If you found this useful, maybe learned something new, please do subscribe and maybe share it with a friend who might be curious about this stuff too.
Yes, thanks for spending your time with us today.
And finally, we always like to leave you with something to think about. So here it is. Take a quiet moment and just reflect on your own history with managing food and weight. Does the idea of meticulous calorie counting feel sustainable and, dare I say, enjoyable for you long term? Or could shifting your focus towards the timing of your meals, a more time restricted approach, potentially align better with your lifestyle and your ultimate goals for well being? Really chew on that, what truly